So you got your top of the line names. These are just free agents. There's, of course, other guys that they can pursue. We talked about Cortland Sutton. We talked about Davante Adams, among others. You got Mike Evans, Odell Beckham Jr., Curtis Samuel, Tyler Boyd, Cedric Wilson, Kendrick Bourne, DJ Chark, Jamal Agnew. We're not even going to bring up Mecole Hardman and Braxton Berrios because we're not that cruel. Nelson Aguilar, Josh Reynolds. Of course, Randall Cobb will be there. Calvin Ridley, becoming a very popular name among Jet fans, maybe the favorite at this point to be added. T. Higgins, supposed to be the top of the market guy. Michael Pittman Jr., if he does hit the market. Mac Hollins is out there. I'm continuing. Trent Sherfield from Buffalo. Hollywood Brown out there. KJ Osborne from the Vikings, who's been very productive. It's a pretty deep list as you kind of like keep scrolling. It's like there's depth. It goes and it goes a little bit. For the Jets, how do you go about? I feel like right now, Davante seems less and less likely to happen, which makes me look at this list and say, we know they've had interest in Ridley in the past. Is Ridley sort of where they start as the 1B option? Did they sniff around Sutton as the 1B option if Denver's really looking to cut their bait there? And then beyond that, what is that next piece? And like a guy like Osborne, a guy like Boyd, a guy who could really round out the 11 personnel, but those guys are going to be expensive on top of whatever other meaningful receiver addition they're going to make. So the challenge is kind of more like, can you dig a little deeper here and find someone who will be productive in that role, but not quite as pricey? And there's so many names out here that, can you pick that right guy out of the like Bourne, Cedric Wilson, DJ Chark, Agnew, Odell? Did that time pass for him? Like Hollywood Brown, is he really going to play that kind of like role? Curtis Samuel is a popular name with Jet fans because, there's been interest in the past and you kind of like that skill set. My head is kind of like trying to wrap around like a Ridley Samuel type combo. And maybe it's not those exact guys, but I don't feel like Davante is going to happen. I don't think Evans and Pittman are going to hit the market, which leaves me thinking like Ridley and Sutton for the bigger name additions. And then when you get to the second tier, is it one of those kind of guys? Is it like a Curtis Samuel? Is it a Cedric Wilson? Is it a Nelson Aguilar? Is it an Agnew? Is it a Paris Campbell? Jakeem Grant? I'm throwing a lot out there, but they need another veteran, so it's not just Lazard and Gibson. And then I'll bundle this with the tight ends before I throw it to you. The only thing we've talked about at tight end is potentially getting Bowers because he's a, dare I say, generational prospect who may be there at 10, and the Jets are like okay at tight end. They have like a league average starter and a league average backup, and that's it right now. They could certainly use more. But if you look at the tight end list, like there's a couple interesting names out there, right? Hunter Henry's a free agent. Dalton Schultz, a guy that all Jet fans thought they were going to get a few years ago, is a free agent. Gerald Everett got some athleticism. He's a free agent. Noah Fant. Gesicki, who's really more of a receiver.
Yeah, pass.
Austin Hooper. Tunyon. I'm sure Rodgers is going to have interest on
that one. That's probably where it goes, right?
There's your one.
Because they're already paying Conklin. So you get a guy in the cheap.
And then just other names. We got to mention Mercedes Lewis somehow still.
I'd rather have the big dog because he's just going to block, and Conklin does not do that. So
make him the tackle. So what are you thinking with all these pass catchers? I'm almost like more. Who is like that other receiver they add like to go with? I guess like what even is the big tier addition at this point? Because I don't think it's going to be Higgins either. I think he's going to get like a stupid contract, and the Jets aren't going to go that high for him.
Well, and if the Bengals are smart, which you're assuming they are, they're going to tag him so they get compensation. And the Jets. The Jets are in position, in my opinion, where they can literally not afford, besides Davante Adams, and even he counts for part of this, they can't afford to trade picks in the first 3 rounds for a wide receiver because the 10th pick or wherever they end up picking in round 1, counting in trades, has to be a tackle. And honestly, you look at the 3rd round pick, and the more you go through the exercise, you're like, man, they got to take another interior player in that 3rd round because it's a good group and they need one. So sure, you could factor in 2025 picks if a team is willing to do that. Davante Adams, I go back and forth all the time because you think with Pierce back that, part of it is, hey, he's happy, they ride it out, they have a good culture. Then part of it with Getsy in order is, well, it feels like Getsy might fit Pierce's identity to be a run-heavy team, why would they continue to pay a 31-year-old receiver insane money and lose this chance to strike to get significant value back for him? Maybe they don't care. Maybe they just keep him because he's a star. But I don't know. They have Jacoby Myers. They could draft another one. But I still, at the end of the day, don't see Adams, the Jets, being anything close to a lock, or honestly not something I'm expecting. Ridley and Sutton is where the conversation always goes, right? Now, the hang up for me with Ridley is, one, he's going to get paid a ton of money. And the Jets, they paid Alan Lazard a ton of money. They're going to have to pay Garrett Wilson a ton of money after this year, as they should. Now, they could do the Jets thing that they always do with good homegrown players. Just string them along, let them play out the deal, franchise tag them, 50-year option, all that stuff. That wouldn't shock me. But, one, I mean, that's just not good business with somebody like Garrett Wilson. And there's a lot to dissect there. So could you structure Ridley's contract where by the time his guaranteed money runs out, that you still have Garrett under team control and work out an extension with him? I think that's very important. I like Sutton better because if Sutton could be had for a fourth, he has 2 years left on his deal, under $18 million per year. And I think Ridley's cap hit will probably be higher than Sutton's, and it'll be longer. Sutton for 2 more years, that fits Rodgers' window. And then after 2 years, when we assume Rodgers walks away, you just kind of clap your hands and let Sutton walk away because he'll be in his 30s. So you're trying to find, the Broncos got that deal done a while ago where that deal, when you think about the actual player, not the Broncos offense and the turmoil they've had. Now, I don't know anything about his relationship with Hackett, so let's factor in that. But the turmoil they've had, that deal aged fine. You don't look at Sutton and go, man, they gave him $24 million and it's like 17 point whatever on the cap. You're like, okay, he might look a lot different with the Jets and with Aaron Rodgers playing quarterback. He's a bigger receiver. He complements Garrett Wilson. I think Ridley and Wilson are similar in a lot of ways. Not that that's a bad thing because the Jets also need people that could separate. That was a massive problem last year. And kind of takes me to your other point that they need another wide receiver who's willing to actually come here on a discount or out of that giant group that all feels the same. Curtis Samuel, Kendrick Bourne, that bracket where they can be a number 3-ish wide receiver. They don't make much money. They're probably on a 1 or 2 year deal, but they're reliable. They're a pro. You're not trotting out, Randall Cobbs of the world. Or let's be real. We like Xavier Gibson a lot on this show. It wasn't even fair to Gibson to have him be such a big factor of the base offense. Gibson was a UDFA that made the team because he's a really good returner, and you were going to develop him as a slot. He was developing in college as a wide receiver. He goes to the NFL, and the Jets are like, well, you have to play because we have no one else. That's not really good business for the Jets, and it's not really good business for the actual player that needs developing. So that's kind of where I stand with wide receiver. It's very busy. I still stand on the take that you can go buy wide receiver. You could also draft it. But the problem is, with what limited draft assets the Jets have, they need to draft offensive line. And I also really think Rodgers is a guy that doesn't have a ton of interest in throwing to a ton of rookies out there. I mean, we kind of know that. We saw it unfold in Green Bay when he was coming to the Jets last year. He really liked Gibson and Brownlee, but he wisely liked them as the 5 and 6 on the roster. So this year, that they'd be ready to be, maybe the 4 and the 5, right? Like they develop along the way. So I think Rodgers will want some veterans out there. I'm sure he wants that for the offensive line, but that's just not the reality of the league. You're going to have some young players on the offensive line that you're developing along the way, and we know the Jets are going to draft those. It's a good wide receiver group. It's going to be torn apart by the time the franchise period ends. I'll tell you this right now. I set the odds of one of Pittman, Higgins, or Evans making it to the market at almost 10-1, like plus 1,000. I think Higgins gets tagged and either traded, extended, or plays on the tag. Pittman gets tagged and extended or plays on the tag. Evans, we do this every year. I don't know why Tampa Bay would want Mike Evans to go anywhere. And you've never hear that Mike Evans, who played and won a playoff game last year, by the way. It's not like the Bucks were 3 and whatever, is dying to leave either, right? Maybe he sees their ceiling kind of limited and wants to go ring chase. Harsh reality for Jets fans, are the Jets in the top 5 of ring chasing destinations next year?
He's got a better chance for a ring with Tampa than the Jets next year.
It would take a serious call from Rodgers. And a lot of guys, trust me, Aaron Rodgers still in this league. is looked at in a way like players that even have never played with him. They get wide-eyed over him. He is legendary. He has not lost that luster. I promise you. But the Jets organization as a whole, I don't think the Beckham plan last year, they almost had it where he's going to come on a deal and kind of be a discount player. Rodgers and the Ravens just did something so far out of the market that didn't really work out that great. He was okay, but they overpaid him. Is this the actual Beckham year where it's like, hey, he's showing up on a 1-year, $6 million deal loaded with incentives to get to 10 or whatever it is? Is that something you even want to do? Because he's not reliable anymore. That doesn't really excite me. I don't know. So it's complex because the Jets have a lot of needs and not an overwhelming amount of assets. And they are going to have to manipulate the cap. They are going to have to get Woody to really show up with the cash, which honestly, I think he will. I think Woody knows that financially the Jets make peculiar decisions all the time that perplex me. And going all the way to backup quarterback last year, quite clearly, which is another need, by the way, that we haven't touched on.
We're gonna save backup quarterback for a whole other episode. Because I do actually think that's going to actually be the first move they make out of the gate. It just feels like on
day
brand.
one.
Day one, Jets have signed Ryan Tannehill or Jacoby Brissett to X. I'm feeling that. We'll close this one with the offensive linemen and the running backs. I'll rip through the running backs because there's some interesting names. Derrick Henry wants to come join his old coaching staff. Josh Jacobs, the Raiders won't let him go anywhere. Tony Pollard coming off a disappointing year, but he'll probably stay. Saquon Barkley, Austin Eckler.
That's
Cordell
the one.
Patterson.
That's the one right there. I think
Eckler could be
because
interesting.
He was
all right.
Here's what Eckler. All right, he was not good this year. He was hurt. If Eckler, who I read a quote today on Fantasy Football Happy Hour directly from him on free agency, and we're going to talk to him this week. So I'll try to get his ear a little bit about this.
There we go.
He said how selective he's going to be on free agency. I'm not saying Eckler is the guy out of that group that's the best. I mean, honestly, he might not even be in the top 5 of the free agent running backs right now with where his career is. But if he's a guy that wants to win, wants to go somewhere new, and meshes with Breece, you have to keep in mind, you don't go get Derrick Henry, Saquon, and Josh Jacobs. I don't think are realistic, obviously. You don't go get a guy like that because you have Breece effing Hall. But Eckler can be a legitimate dynamic pass catcher that plays, and who knows if he's going to be happy about this, but maybe 40% of the snaps on a 1 to 2 year deal. And paying a running back's a whole other conversation for this team. But I don't think the Jets need the best possible number 2. And whatever guy in that group is comfortable viewing themselves as that is the guy that actually can handle the role is the most interesting one. Eckler is probably confident enough that he still views himself as a number 1, but we'll see. He's interesting.
Still got Cordell Patterson. Could do a little running back and receiver.
Always interesting.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire, maybe built for a good number 2 role. Zeke still out there, was actually better for the Pats than Dalvin Cook was for the Jets.
He might be the most interesting of all when you factor in money, role, usage.
Nah, I wouldn't write it off. I am sure the Jets are going to have interest there.
The Jets goal line offense
Swift
stinks.
Oh,
he's the best.
Their short yardage is,
and he's great at that. Swift, just hurt a lot.
Swift, Boston Scott, Damian Harris, Abdullah, Cam Akers. It's a lot of people. People go cheap.
A lot of guys.
J.K. Dobbins, injury concerns, of course.
Right. He'll take the top dollar.
Rashad Penny, A.J. Dillon, if we're looking for another Rodgers familiar face. And Antonio
And then
Gibson.
a million guys that get cut, right? Like it's just a position that a million guys get cut. Man,
Gibson's
it's
kind of interesting as a pass catching back. I mean, he is like a pure pass catcher. And of course, maybe Ty Johnson wants to come home. Offensive line, we know Kelsey's going to retire. A lot of talk about Tyron Smith. Not the worst idea, but let's see what the money is.
How does Dallas let him walk?
Yeah,
that feels like the Jets. Like if they let Brick walk, it's just weird.
Near the top of the list, I won't even announce it. Dwayne Brown, Pete, who we've talked about a lot, could be an interior option. Kevin Zeitler could be an interior option late in the career. Connor Williams, Trent Brown, Jonah Williams. Jet fans love Jonah Williams. Always talking about Jonah Williams. A lot of ex-Jet celebrities on here. Chuma Doga, GVR, George Fant, all free agents.
All
Dan
played
Feeney.
Better anywhere else.
Yeah,
they all went somewhere else, and they all played better.
Donovan Smith, Dalton Reisner, who we talked a little bit last year. Graham Glasgow out there, a favorite of a few years ago. I mean, it's a pretty...
Robert Hunt from the Dolphins should be out there.
Robert Hunt from the Dolphins out there.
He's very good. Lloyd Cushenberry.
Cushenberry. Isn't Runyon from the Packers a free agent?
He's a free agent as well.
That'll be another name that we'll hear turn around. The great Billy Turner's a free agent. You can walk, sir. That's
you can run.
We could keep kind of going through the list, but it depends how deep you really want to get. I'm sure, now you're getting into some of the depth names. I mean, there's only certain types of players are ultimately really going to hit free agency here. The same names that you kind of feel like every year: Cameron Irvings, Pat Elflein. It's like the same guys are always kind of bouncing through, and they're bouncing through for a reason. I mean, if Smith doesn't leave Dallas, do you get Pete or Zeitler for the interior? And then maybe you're kicking AVT to tackle. And Cushenberry's another way you could go about doing that. Jonah Williams, I guess, could be a Band-Aid for a couple of years.
Yeah.
I don't think Onwenu is really going to be in play for the Jets. I feel like he's going to get paid more money than they're going to pay. I don't know. Is there any other name I'm really missing here?
I think they're going to pay up big on one offensive line free agent.
Is it like Trent Brown maybe?
He's just, his buy-in is scary. I've never seen a player come and go in terms of buy-in like Trent Brown. And, obviously New England's been able to get the most out of him. I think I could see Pete or Hunt, the Jets be, they just fire up a big money deal with someone like that to get a body on the line that you feel really good about. And then you're looking at it and going, okay, we got a guy that we'd like to play on the interior. We'd like AVT to be one of the tackles. We like Tippmann. Lakin is the biggest variable on this team. There's no reason to bring him back. There's no reason to bring him back, but there's also no chatter that he's getting cut. I guess also part of that is you see what you can do money-wise, and if the money matches what Lakin would be freeing up, then you cut him, but you don't cut him before that because you could sit there and be like, cool, we have no one to play offensive line.